Good morning, Church family. Happy Sabbath. And of course, welcome to those who are joining us online. It's nice to see you, not see you, but know that you are seeing us and joining us virtually. One really quick announcement that wasn't mentioned, just so you're aware. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to have communion on April 6th. So if it's been a while, we haven't had communion. I want to make sure that you are invited and know that you're welcome to that event. We are in a sermon series called Seeking and Understanding. It is the last series I will do before we move to Nebraska, and it is one that has been in my heart for a while. Hi, how are you?
We're just getting the water.
Oh, I understand. No problem. It's been in my heart for a while, and Seeking and Understanding is a series that is looking at some of the social justice issues and current events issues that I feel need to be dialogued about. And some people might feel funny about that. Why are we talking about this? It's church. Because you're talking about it. Because you're fighting about it. Because you're arguing about it. And I know because I can see you online. You forget that your pastor follows you sometimes online. And I can see the conversations that are happening. And so the bottom line is, it's here, it's real. These are conversations that people are happening, whether they are in 5th grade, or whether they're 50, or whether they're 80. These are just realities that we deal with. And I believe that it's important to have a biblically based, Christ-centered way to talk about these things. These are real issues that we need to talk about, and pretending they don't exist isn't helpful to anybody. And so in approaching this series, I decided to call it Seeking and Understanding, not seeking a solution, not seeking a winning argument to prove one position over the other, but simply building a framework so when we do engage in these issues, we can do it intelligently and with grace and with love. Are you following me so far? We want to have an understanding so we can have better conversations. So again, this is not about winning a conversation. This is not about me getting up here and being an apologist for a particular position or a social movement. It's simply trying to help us understand better. Last week we talked about power and how each and every one of us, no matter who we are, is a steward of power. Each one of us has a measure of agency. That's the ability to affect circumstances. And how we choose to use that power matters. And the bottom line is, we are all, no problem. We are all called to share our power with other people. Again, this doesn't mean when we show up and save them, because sometimes you can save people and leave people powerless. We are called to share our power. And now we're going to be doing this next sermon. And I'm going to tell you, I wrestled with this one. I think this, of all the sermons we're going to do, this is the trickiest one. I was telling some other people, I have to thread a very fine needle this morning with what we're going to talk about. And so I want you to keep this in prayer. I want you to listen to it with an open mind. I'm going to mention family members in this sermon, so it's especially dangerous for me. I know that they will be watching this sermon eventually and talking about it amongst themselves. So there's that piece of it. And I also wrestled because next week's sermon, which is entitled Politically Correct, relates very closely to what we're talking about today. And I waffled, should I do that one or this one first? And I think this is the most natural fit. So if I don't say quite everything you feel like I should have said today, just know that there's always next week. And so I hope to see you then. All that said, I invite you to stand. Let's read our scripture verse together. This is the verse we had last week. It still applies this week. Read it loud and strong. This is Paul writing a letter to the church at Ephesus. Let's read it with a little bit of authority. Here we go. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic power over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Perfect. Let's pray together. Jesus, thank you so much for the opportunity to gather and talk about real issues that involve real people. These issues are tricky and they are emotionally loaded. So as we pray every week, help us to set as far as possible, our baggage down a little bit so we can be open and we can hear and we can dialogue together. This is not about an argument. It's not about winning. It's not about anything like that. It's simply saying, how can we understand what's happening better so we can respond with grace and truth and love? Jesus, guard our hearts and minds from every distraction. Help us to listen patiently and help us to really internalize it so we can become better communicators of the gospel. And of course, we lift up all those who are hurting and grieving in our congregation, the Divalvis family. We lift up Nebraska and Iowa and places wrestling with floods and all the other things that are happening in the world. May we see your hand at work, and may you bring healing and justice soon. In your name we pray. Amen. You may be seated. Today's message is entitled Systems and Standpoints. In the mid-1980s, my father brought into our house a Nintendo Entertainment System. Looks like this. Some of you grunted. I heard. You already know. It provided minutes of joy and hours of seething rage. Because the games back then were so primitive, and the graphics were so poor, and the controls were so bad, the likely thing that would happen when you turned it on is you would die for inexplicable reasons before you could even press a button. I died? What happened? I have no idea. Well, start it over, I guess. I don't know. When you did manage to press the button, the technology was so rudimentary that sometimes you know that you were jumping over the chasm. You know you were steering your car towards safety, but you hit the button and nothing happened. And so you crashed or you fell down. So all the Christmas money, all the birthday money, all the presents that you directed towards getting new games for this system ended up in broken dreams and broken hearts and absolute rage. Now, the usual response would happen when something like this, when the controller failed or the game was so poorly designed that you were dying for reasons you couldn't explain. You didn't even press a button. How could I possibly die? I haven't started the game yet. The typical response was to start shouting, "Cheater! It cheated! The system cheated me! It cheated!" And not a few times was the controller hurled at the plastic box. Not a few times did we actually crawl over from our position on the couch and start banging on it. "You cheater!" And this is exactly the time that my mother would walk into the room and gasp and say, "I knew video games would make you violent. Turn that thing off. You're grounded." "No, Mom, you don't understand. It cheated." "How can it cheat? It's just a plastic box. Now get it to timeout." "No, Mom." And I knew as I was being dragged away to timeout that thing was smirking at me. I mean, I'm not crazy. I could feel it. It was looking at me. It was taunting me. Stupid thing. As an adult, I discovered a YouTube channel called Angry Nintendo Nerd. A man about my age goes back and plays these games while screaming and raging and cursing at what's happening. Now, I can't recommend the channel to you because it's vulgar and crass. However, I appreciate that there is somewhere in the world, there is a grown man who has dedicated his life to screaming and raging and calling that thing names because it's confirmation that I'm not a bad player. I'm not a stupid person. I'm perfectly competent of playing a video game. It's the system. It is the game that was rigged to make it more difficult than it had to be. Occasionally an exceptional player would get through or get lucky and make something happen. But for the most of us, when we were playing these games, it was the game itself that was set up in a way where it was very difficult, if not impossible, for us to win. If you have your Bibles, let's turn back to Ephesians 6:12. Ephesians 6:12, Paul is writing a letter to believers in Ephesus who are struggling against persecution for refusing to participate in the worship of Artemis. The big Artemis temple was there, pagan worship, and the emperor cult. All these social pressures are trying to move this church to worship in ways that conflict with what they know is true and what is right. And in this passage, Paul indicates that the physical realities that we see are influenced by spiritual realities. You following so far? The physical realities, the physical pressures we see that work on us are often motivated by spiritual forces. And it's not just angels and demons. I would suggest to you that sometimes it's what we call ideologies. And we'll throw a definition on the screen. This is a very simple definition of ideology. It is a system of ideas which shape everyday life maintained by those in power. An ideology is a system of ideas. It's a system of thought that shape everyday life, your experience, that's maintained by those in power. Let's read what Paul says. 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but behind all those physical things are against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. Paul indicates by the terms that he uses that it's not just individual people that abuse their power, but there are systems of thought and social systems that work on us that are abusive. The word rulers, for example, that he uses is archos, which comes from the word arche, which means beginning, but it can also mean primary or first of many. When he refers to rulers, it's the same term used in Luke 20:20, and we'll throw this on the screen for you when people are trying to trip up Jesus. So they watched Jesus and sent spies who pretended to be sincere. Now again, there's a system right there. You have a group of people who have their spies, who are networking, trying to trip up Jesus, that they might catch him in something he said so as to deliver him to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. Okay, that governor is one person, but that governor represents a system of authority, correct? It represents a whole system. So Paul is indicating that it's not just individuals who abuse their power that we encounter. There are individuals who abuse their power, but we also face entire systems of power that work against the best interest of people. Anyone who has ever been caught in an automated answering system with their mobile phone service or their cable provider can testify. There's a problem with your bill, you want to change your service, and you get into sort of this nightmare of a system. You don't even know where you are, not talking to real people. I just need to talk to somebody. Fine, I'm just going to give up. I'll just keep paying the extra fees. It's easier that way. To gain an understanding of the social issues that this world faces, we have to understand that this world is full of systems that abuse power, not just individuals. Still tracking with me? Maybe. Yeah. All right. Now, the Bible contains numerous narratives about corrupt systems that work against people. If you have your Bibles handy, turn, flip, tap, whatever you have to do to the book of Revelation, chapter 13. In our Sabbath school Bible study time before church, we're studying the book of Revelation. I believe this was a chapter that was studied a few weeks ago. Revelation 13, 16, and 17. Talks about the beast rising out of the earth. The beast is a symbol of a political power, and in traditional Seventh-day Adventist Christian eschatology, it represents the United States. Verse 16, talking about the mark of the beast. It also causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. Now, are we talking about just an individual here, or is there a system at work? There is going to be some marker, whether it's a belief system, ascribing to an ideology, something that says, all right, you're in the in crowd, so you get to buy and sell. If you don't participate in this ideology, in this system, then you can't get what you need. It's an abuse of power by a system. Now, sometimes we have people who represent systems, but again, they are working through systems to build up their power and take power away from other people. If you just turn over a couple chapters, let's go to 18, Revelation 18. Take a look at another example. Revelation 18, 1-3. For those of you who have grown up in a Seventh-day Adventist Christian church, this will be a very familiar passage to you. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice. And just read this first line with me, because those of you who've grown up in the Advent, you just know this. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. And then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people." Now, Babylon refers to an ancient religious system that's described in the book of Daniel, a city, a kingdom. And if you remember the story of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, you had a king named Nebuchadnezzar who abused his power, his government, his authority, to try to persecute people who didn't worship in the way that he wanted them to. Right? He had a particular way of belief. If you didn't follow what you're getting burned alive. So Revelation draws on that imagery, and it talks about in the last days, things are going to be like Babylon. Babylon represents a state of the world before Jesus comes where all the systems of trade, relationships, nature, and justice have become corrupted. Tracking with me still? Everything has become corrupted, and you have to come out of that system. We have so many examples of corrupted systems, particularly with governments in the world. I mean, think about it. Nazi Germany is an example. Dictatorship in North Korea is an example. What's happening in Venezuela is an example. We have religious systems that preach prosperity. The only one who prospers is the preacher. and not the followers. There are education systems that are selective with their perspectives that they teach. Certain voices that get removed from the textbook, we're not going to talk about those. We're just going to talk about this. There are systems concerning taxes that don't work out for everybody. Has anyone ever had a problem with taxes before? Does anyone have any opinions about taxes before? Maybe a few, right? It's not working for people, at least not all people. There are toxic families full of addiction and abusive systems. And if you've known people who have grown up in a toxic family that's full of addiction or physical abuse or sexual abuse, emotional abuse, have you ever tried to watch someone get well in that family? What happens as soon as somebody decides to get well? That whole system turns on that person to keep them broken. There are systems of power, from patterns of thinking reinforced by family dynamics to social norms to government structures that keep people poor and powerless. Pastor Mike was working with somebody in our community just recently, and this person who is elderly, trying to do what they need to do, trying to not be homeless, and Pastor Mike has done his best to advocate with them for certain agencies, and he talked to an agent a couple weeks ago, just candidly, and said, one of the hardest things with this system, trying to help people who are genuinely doing everything they can, is that even when they're doing that, it takes about 5 years to get them the help they need. This is not about a person who doesn't want to get better and do what they have to do. The entire system is set up in a way with so many obstacles that they just can't get what they need. Does Seattle have a homelessness problem? Does Tacoma have a homelessness problem? These are not just one or two people. There are systems at work that make the game of life much more difficult than it has to be. Now, in Revelation 18, what I want to highlight here is the world's corruption has become so normal that God has to send an angel, messengers, to wake people up because they don't even know it's corrupted. When you are born into a system, and everybody is, your family system, the system in your country, in your county, the world, there's all kinds of systems that we're a part of. When you are born, you just encounter these things as if they are normal. It is just the way it is. It's just how you do life, not realizing that maybe this system is not working for you or not working for other people and you don't even know it. Think about it. God has to especially call people out. We read this and think, oh, what an awful place Babylon is in the book of Revelation. But again, it's people's normal. They don't even know they're in Babylon. They don't even know. Here's something I want you to keep in mind. What's on the screen. Every system represents someone's normal. Every system represents someone's normal. Just the way life is, the way it's always been, the way I do life. Not realizing that they are part of a system that may or may not be working for them or other people. In the 1970s, Nancy Harstock developed an influential philosophical framework called critical standpoint theory. Critical standpoint theory comes in the critical tradition of communication theory. There are 7 traditions. When we talk about communication theory, there are 7 traditions. Someone's arguing for an 8th. We'll see if they get in. But there are 7 right now. And the critical tradition is concerned with questioning what's normal. Things that we inherit. Ways of talking, ways of being that we just all assume are just the way they're supposed to be and they're traditional. We've always done it this way. The critical tradition starts asking questions about it. Yeah, I know we've done it this way, but is this the way we should be doing it? Is this the way that's working for everybody? So critical standpoint theory has become influential and that it functions in so many of the social movements, social justice movements you see. It has a flavor of this theory. It's widespread, it's everywhere. Even if they wouldn't call it this, even if they don't even know who Nancy Harstock is, this way of thinking is everywhere. So it's important for you to know about it. Critical standpoint theory operates on 4 assumptions. I'll throw these on the screen for you. Number 1, knowledge is socially situated. So depending on where you are in life, socioeconomically, what your gender is, what race you identify with, there's a certain amount of knowledge that's available to you. Okay? So how do you know, many of you know that the CIA would probably have more knowledge than you do on a few things. Right? So depending on where you are in life, as parents, there's things I know that my kids don't. Right? So depending on where you're situated in life, it affects how much knowledge you have. Tracking so far? I'm going to ask that question a lot because we're covering heavy stuff. This is master's degree level stuff. Those in power shape and control social situations and thereby the knowledge of those not in power. Tracking so far? Marginalized groups are socially situated in ways that make them more aware of power abuses of social systems. So in other words, those who benefit from a system are not as aware of how it works as those who are being abused by it. Research that focuses on power relations. So if I want to talk about power, if I'm going to be a social scientist and research power, should begin with the lives of the marginalized, not those in power. So again, what this is suggesting and what it's privileging is saying those who are the marginal voices have better insights into a system than those in power who benefit from it. Give me a quick example, a practical example. Let's say you're a CEO or a politician. You have customers or constituents. And even though, as far as your bottom line is concerned, things still look good, your board of directors, your executives are living well. Everyone seems to be happy, but there's a growing rise in customer complaints. Your constituents are not happy. There's a growing rise online, whether it's Yelp reviews or Google reviews. It is in your best interest to listen to what's happening to those people, even though you don't feel it yet. It is in your best interest to say, okay, whatever business, whatever political system I've set up, if my people are not happy, if something is happening to them that's making them upset, I should listen to them because they're going to have an insight that maybe I'm missing. I feel comfortable, I feel fine, but maybe I'm missing something. That's what it's saying. Now, is this theory flawless? No. No theory is flawless. Is it absolute? No. Every human theory should be debated and discussed and thought about and dissected. That's just part of what it is. However, there is a biblical element to this. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn to John 9:24. John 9:24 to 34. This is a story about Jesus healing a man born blind. Now, in those days, if you were born blind, it wasn't because of genetics. It was because you must have done something. Your parents must have done something. God is punishing you. You're a sinner. You need to be probably a beggar. They were not highly thought of, you understand what I'm saying. They would be marginalized. So Jesus heals this person. Verse 24. So for the second time that day, they brought him to the religious leaders. The first time it didn't go well, so this is the second time. They called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." Talking about Jesus. He answered, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, though, is I was blind, and now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why? Do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" They're getting a little sassy there and probably making some people angry. And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and would you teach us?" And they cast him out. Now, is there a system at work there? Is there a religious, political ideology working there? Look, people like you don't get healed. Not just in terms of biology. It's not just biologically impossible. The type of person you are, it just doesn't happen to you. You're a sinner. Get out of here. Because of their belief system and the power they got from it as Pharisees, they were not willing to listen to a man who was blind, who was healed. Now think about this. What would have happened had those in power listened to that blind man who was healed? What might have changed had they actually listened to him? Amen. Now, Jesus has some pretty sharp words in verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out and found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Now some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains." You are blinded by your system that you claim helps you to see, but you don't see anything. It could have been so different had they listened to that one person on the edges. Now, one major problem when someone criticizes a system, and here's where we're getting to some of the tenser moments of the sermon. One thing that tends to happen when someone criticizes a system is we react as individuals, and we take it personally. Instead of critiquing a system, we'll respond as individuals. Instead of listening to the criticism of a potential system that we don't notice because it's our normal. Let me say it again. Often when someone criticizes a system, we respond as individuals instead of listening to the critique that might reveal to us that we are part of something that is simply our normal and we're not aware of. Now I'm going to give you two current examples, not in order to debate their merit, or this is seeking an understanding, not seeking a solution, but in order to illustrate how to hear them. Now, as an aside, if you want to study social movements, I'm going to give you some advice here, pro tip. If you want to understand social justice movements, don't make your primary sources people with TV shows or radio shows. Because they have audiences that expect to hear certain things in a certain way. And it's usually inflammatory. Whether it's left or right, doesn't matter. You want to go to scholars who write boring books and who give lectures, and it's dry reading, but you know that they don't have this massive audience they're trying to appease, and so they're only doing this because they believe in it, and they believe that it's important. Start there. You can enjoy your radio shows still, but I'm just saying, start with something that's less inflammatory. Now, I'm going to start by talking about two movements that would seem to target someone like me. The feminist criticism of patriarchy and white privilege. Oof, just feel the mood shift in the room. Delightful. All right, the first thing, how do we talk about the feminist critique of patriarchy? In 1971, 24-year-old Mary Kay McLeod Silver was hired by one of our publishing houses. Some of you might know the story. She was hired by a publishing house to do some editorial work, and Mary Kay learned that her coworker was receiving 60% more in wages than she was for doing the same job. Now, those of you ladies, if you found out that your male coworker who was doing the same job was getting paid 60% more than you, might you have something to say about that? You might have a concern about that. So she approached the authorities in the publishing house and said, hey, I've noticed this. And they said, well, we're on the head of household plan. He is the head of household with children. That's why we pay him more. You and your husband don't have children, so that's why you get paid what you get paid. Already some of you are like, what in the world? Like, it's just the way it is, right? So, what happens a few years later is Mary Kay's husband loses his job. And so now she is the head of the household provider. She comes to him and says, hey, this is what's happened. They balk, say no. And if you keep pushing this, you're going to lose your job. You're already starting to feel a little warmer here. So, I believe it was about 1973, she starts her lawsuit against the Christian publishing house. The executive committee of the denomination meets and says, because you have decided to sue the church, we are terminating your employment. Now stop for a second and think about this. Because and by the way, her male coworker supported her. And everyone's saying, hey, this is a problem. There's a whole system of pay here that's not fair. She calls it out and is fired for calling it out. You can see there's a system at work here. Something is not right. Now, eventually, she won in 1982. Took that long. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, but Pastor Seth, that is like back in the 80s. It's like the early 80s. And first of all, how dare you? I was born in 1980, and I'm not that old. I'm a young man in the prime of life. So just hold that critique. The second thing is that I wish it was confined to the 1980s, but it's not. In 1999, a devotional book called The Faith I Live By was published by the Adventist Church. And it was used in 2017 as the evening daily devotional. March 8th is International Women's Day. It's been International Women's Day since 1975. March 8th. Take a note, my friends. March 8th. It's 1975. In 2017, the Adventist Church in its official Instagram page posted the devotional for March 8th, International Women's Day. Here's what it is. Satan commenced his work with Eve to cause her to disobey. She first erred in wandering from her husband, next in lingering around the forbidden tree, and next in listening to the voice of the tempter and even daring to doubt what God had said. Posted on the church's official Instagram page, March 8, 2017. In case you were wondering, it didn't go over well. There was a few people who shared some comments and were pretty upset about that. I mean, like, this is International Women's Day. Thanks a lot, women. Way to ruin the world. Not great. Now, this happened just 2 years around the debates that are often, about women's ordination, especially coming from the conservative side of the church, how women shouldn't be ordained in our church. And on the left side, I have friends on the left side of things who will shame women for saying, hey, I just want to be a wife and mother, and they will shame them for it. When all this stuff is happening, it tells me that, first of all, that these experiences are consistent enough and they're widespread enough that somebody needs to say something. Bottom line. And when it actually comes to feminism, what this is about is about whether you choose to get married or not get married, have kids or not have kids, be a pastor or not be a pastor, have a career, whatever. It's your choice. And whatever you choose to do as a woman, you shouldn't be shamed for it. That's what it's about. That's one thing. It's not about men are bad, men are evil. It's not what this is about. Now, the second example. Let's talk about white privilege. Talked about patriarchy a little bit, how it's not about individual people, it's a system. Let's talk about white privilege. Now, my guess is when I say white privilege, that is a term that will make people more emotionally uncomfortable in this congregation than patriarchy. So because of that, let me tell you what it is not. This comes based on dialogue with my black friends and black colleagues and brown friends and brown colleagues and reading social scientists, not people who have television shows and radio shows. Let me tell you what it is not. White privilege does not mean that there isn't prejudice and privilege in every people group. No matter what group you're in, it can be your marriage, it can be your family, you could be anywhere. There's always going to be power dynamics anywhere you go. Bottom line. The term does not mean that all white people are racist. That is not what that means. It isn't about individuals, it's about a system. It doesn't mean that white people don't have obstacles and challenges and pain in their life. That's not what it's about. Although that's usually, I remember the first time I heard the term, I reacted, well, I've had pain and trouble. It's not, I'm reacting as an individual to a critique of a system. It's not about me. It's not saying that you should feel guilty for having privilege. Any system, you didn't choose. I mean, it'd be nice if you could pick which family you wanted to be born to and where you wanted and what time in history, but you don't have choice over that. You are who you are. You have what you have. So it's not about feeling guilty for that. It's not saying that because you have privilege in whatever context, not just this one, that somehow you're racist. That's not about that. What it's talking about is every social system there is on the world, there's power-privilege dynamics. And if you happen to be somebody who benefits from particular privilege, how are you using that? But it's still hard. How do we unpack it? If it doesn't mean all those other things you just talked about, what does it mean? My mother, who I've shared, I know, I can talk about her in the sermon. She doesn't mind. I know she talks about me at her work, so it's sort of a cycle of abuse that we have happening. My mother, who is an outspoken Trump supporter and a political conservative and pretty socially conservative, also works sort of in a halfway house counseling men, mostly men, but I think she may work with women too, who are coming out of prison and getting into sort of back to the real world, if you will. And she posted a video on white privilege that I found very challenging. Challenging not just to me personally, but challenging because I didn't expect her to post that. And I could describe it to you, but it's better if you just watch it and then we'll talk about it. It's a very short video. Go ahead and play this.
My sister-in-law is in front of me, and she's, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who's a strawberry blonde,
can we back up the video just a little
freckled,
bit? That first part's important.
Very delightful, warm, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? Isn't it a nice day today? They're just chatting up, and my sister-in-law, who's half black, half white, but looks white, blue eyes, whiter than most white folks, very white. She and I, we kind of grew up together. We raised our children together. So they're first cousins, and it's a wonderful, very, very multicultural family. So we're going in a Safeway one day. And Kathleen, my sister-in-law, is in front of me, and she's, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who's a strawberry blonde, freckled, very delightful, warm, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? This is a nice day today. They're just chatting up. And says, yeah. So Kathy writes her check, and she steps off to the side with her groceries because she's waiting for me. Of course, again, Kathleen looks white, right? So I come up. No conversation. She looks up at me. Absolutely no, just a little chatter. And I write my check. My daughter, however, is 10, notices immediately the difference in how she responds to me. So I write my check, and she goes, I'm going to need 2 pieces of ID. At which point, my daughter looks at me, and she gets very, very embarrassed, and tears are kind of coming up in her eye, like, Mommy, you're not gonna let her do this. Why is she doing this to us, right? So I'm trying to figure out what I should do, because behind me are 2 elderly white women, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so then I become the angry black woman, right? And they're going to be, and I'm just trying to second guess all the drama. So then I just give her the 2 pieces of ID. I said, some things you got to choose your battles, right? And then it gets worse. She pulls out the bad check book, right? So this is the book that shows the people who've written bad checks. So she starts searching for my license in the bad checks, at which point it's just out of control now. Just as I'm standing there trying to decide what to do, and it's really deeply humiliating. Now my daughter is in full-blown emotionally upset, who's 10. My sister-in-law walks back over, and she steps in and she says, excuse me, why are you doing this? And the checker goes, well, what do you mean? She goes, why are you taking her through all of these changes? Why are you doing that? She goes, well, this is our policy. She goes, no, it's not your policy because you didn't do that with me. Oh, well, I know you've been. She goes, no, she's been here for years. I've only lived here for 3 months. And so at this point, the 2 white elderly ladies go, oh, I can't believe what this checker has done with this woman. And it's totally unacceptable. At which point, the manager walks over. So the manager walks over and says, is there a problem here? And then my sister-in-law again responds. She goes, yes, there is a problem here. Here is what happened. So you see, she used her white privilege. And even though Kathleen is half black and half white, she recognizes what that means. And she made the statement. She pointed out the injustice. And she, as a result of that one act, influenced everyone in that space. But what would have happened? I can't know for certain had the black woman said, this is unfair. Why are you doing this to me? Would it have had the same impact? But Kathleen knew that she walked through the world differently than I did. And she used her white privilege to educate and make right a situation that was wrong. That's what you can do every single day.
So the idea, term set aside for a moment, is the statement that she makes. She recognizes she walks differently through life than I do. There's different things we all have to deal with. And whether you like the term or not, next week we'll talk about politically correct. We'll get to it next week. They say that things like this are consistent enough and widespread enough that something needs to be said. Now, no matter who you are or what system you find yourself in, if you notice that you receive preferential treatment based on your age or socioeconomic status or the color of your skin, it's on us, it's on you to step in and correct that and say, that's not okay. This is not how we deal with people. Are you following me? Now, to wrap both of this up, I'll talk about my grandma for a second to illustrate it even further and how I don't take these 2 things personally. When someone starts talking about patriarchy or white privilege and why I don't anymore, I used to react the way I used to react with getting real defensive and stuff. My grandmother is a Roman Catholic, and I'm a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. There are some differences in our belief system. I have some criticisms of the Roman Catholic Church theological and ecclesiastical system. But I love my grandma. Let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you a secret, because I know she's watching. Hi, Grandma. My grandma is a better Christian than I am. She prays more than I do. She reads her Bible probably more than I do. I love my grandma. I have no problem with my grandma. What I have a problem with is the system. Do you understand? When someone critiques the system, it's not about you necessarily as an individual. It's about the system. And as we look around, we can see, yeah, there are things in this world that may work for me. But because it's my normal, I don't realize that it's affecting somebody else. And I need to maybe ask some hard questions and do whatever I can, whatever position, whatever little power I have to make it better for everybody else, so everyone else can have a fair shot at life. For now, in closing, I'm reminded when Jesus turned the tables on the prevailing economic and religious system that was cheating people as they tried to pay for their sacrifices. Everyone would come in and they want to pay for their sacrifices at the temple, and the temple broke people up. Okay, you're a Jew, you're a man, you're a woman, you're not a Jew, you go over here. And they would cheat people right there in the temple. That was the way the system was working. And Jesus enters that system, and he literally, physically turns the tables over on it. And here's what he says. It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer. And he is citing Isaiah 57, which adds, for all people, all nations, for everybody. But you have made it a den of robbers. There are systems in the world that rob people of their agency and their power. And you and I are called to uncover those systems and to turn the tables on it. So everybody who is loved by God, everybody, and God loves everybody, so everybody has the chance to win at the game of life. Amen. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, you have called us to overturn systems of power and social realities that are so embedded in life that we aren't even aware of them. And I know terminology can be difficult, and we'll deal with it next week, but at the bottom line is we recognize in our own experience and in the experience and testimonies of others that there are systems of power that don't benefit everybody. Give us discernment and awareness to be able to reveal those things and to share our power in ways that change it so everybody can get what they need. Help us to share our power. And when we hear criticisms of certain systems, help us not to react individually. Help us to be able to calmly, graciously, lovingly reflect and dialogue and critique about these things. These are huge concepts that require deep conversations. Help us to be gracious with them and to listen better. And hopefully through our dialogue and our listening and our graciousness, we gain a deeper understanding of not just these abstract concepts, but the understanding of those around us, our neighbors and our coworkers and our classmates. And we can really have a deeper experience of community that brings you glory. In your name we pray, amen.